SPARC is a provincial network, and we would like to acknowledge the traditional Indigenous land on which we are so fortunate to create and partake in the arts. Our organization is situated in Ontario, which is covered by over 46 treaties and other agreements, such as land purchases by the Crown signed between 1781 and 1930, as well as many, many unceded and disputed territories. What we now call Ontario is home to many Indigenous nations, First Nations people, the Métis and Inuit people, who have been the traditional caretakers of this land and the water that we drink every day for many generations and continue to live, work, and thrive here today. Hello, and welcome to SPARC Peer-to-Peer Chats. I'm Rachel Marks, the Rezo SPARC Network Executive Director. I'm a middle-aged white woman with chin-length blonde and pink hair. I'm wearing dark purple cat's eye glasses and a blue top with woodland creatures on it. My preferred pronouns are she and her. Thank you. Today, I'm really looking forward to hearing from Sedina Fiati, co-founder and lead producer of the Black Pledge Collective Canada. Sedina is Toronto-based social justice consultant and an award-winning artist for stage and screen. Proudly Black and queer, Sedina holds a BFA in music theatre from the University of Windsor. Sedina was the co-chair of ACTRA Toronto's Diversity Committee, where she co-led the committee in several initiatives, including a partnership with Working the Scene in Color and the Sandy Ross Awards, and was the second VP of Membership Engagement for Canadian Actors Equity Association's Member Council. Sedina recently completed almost 3 years as Nightwood Theatre's artist activist in residence. Welcome, Sedina. And Rebecca Ann Bloom. Rebecca Ann Bloom is an IMPOC actor, photographer, artist, and writer. Known by most as Becca, she is the general manager of Globus Theatre, a professional rural theatre located in Bobcaygeon. As a performer, Rebecca has appeared in a variety of productions, most recently as Cinderella in Globus's 2022 Panto, Angel Plunkett in a play reading of Here on the Flight Path at Globus Theatre, Kit in a play reading of Norm Foster's Dear Santa, also at Globus, and as Miss Muffet in Mother Goose at the Sterling Festival Theatre. She's a member of Globus Theatre School Dramatic Arts faculty and recently created and directed the inaugural run of the Youth Winter Arts Project. A jack of all trades, Rebecca is also the owner of R.A. Bloom Creations and Photography, a freelance content creator, was a guest blogger for SPARC, and was a participating playwright of the 2021 Playwrights Guild of Canada Craft Bites Initiative. And I will be dropping the link to Rebecca's photography website in the chat later on. Before we begin, if anyone watching on Facebook has a question, please put it in the comment box and I will voice that here in the Zoom room for you, or actually I'll put it in the comment box here. And I'm now going to hand the rest of the evening over to Sedina. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Deeply appreciate it. Okay. Welcome, everybody. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Please, those SPARC Network. We have to say both languages, don't we? Like it's required. I've done my share of work, mainly based in Toronto, as my bio said, but certainly done my share of work outside of Toronto. And I just am really excited that SPARC exists and that you all are meeting and coming together. I think the work of organizing rural artists is super important for the future, actually, of our country. Talk to me over a beer. I'll tell you more about it. But officially, you know what? I have a little presentation that I'll share about Black Pledge so that everyone's clear on what we do and what we're all about. Here we go. Okay, share the screen. Okay. Amazing. And then I'll go into present mode. Here we go. Okay, so the Black Pledge is an initiative to dismantle anti-Black racism in live performance. It started in 2020. There was an angry call from me that I wanted to create a pledge, and definitely it was in response to the various commitments from live performance organizations to address anti-Black racism following the murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and others. Right? So we remember it was such a moment in time. when everybody was saying, okay, we really need to address anti-Black racism. And a group of us were just like, great, let's make sure that what you said you were going to do, you're actually going to do. So a collective of us dreamed up a pledge which would ensure accountability and long lasting shifts in the live performance industry. The pledge itself offers a series of commitments to aid live organizations in dismantling anti-Black racism at the structural level to affirm and advance Black people working in live performance across Canada. Sounds so great. In addition, it asks theater, dance, and opera organizations to make a 3-year commitment to the following: creating and updating policy and addressing past harms, increasing Black representation beyond tokenization, prioritizing historically marginalized groups within Black communities, and making an annual monetary commitment. As well, to work at building and repairing community relationships with Black people. So really the crux of the pledge is that each organization has to come up with their own plan based on their own capacity to address anti-Black racism. It was something that was really important to us because it's like each organization is different. You know, it can range from like one full-time person all the way to, having like 100 people. So really their capacity is different, and we recognize that. So these are the capacity basic commitments, which again take into account what each organization can actually do. We hopefully that people address the following: programming, hiring and casting, Black community support and reciprocity, and training and development. We hold organizations accountable to their commitments through a series of meetings and conversations where we build relationships and we share and exchange knowledge. The first 5 signers of the Black Pledge are New World Theatre, located in Vancouver, BC, Nightwood Theatre in Toronto, Stratford Festival in Toronto, in Stratford, Stratford, Ontario, Shakespeare in the Rough in Toronto, and 2B Theatre in Halifax. We're also in talks with Toronto Fringe, Buddies in Bad Times, and Theatre Aquarius, as well as developing strategic partnerships with TAPA, the Toronto Alliance of Performing Arts, PACT, which is Professional Alliance of Canadian Theatres, Choral Canada, and Culture.Brew.Art. And we're in very early talks with Ontario Culture Days, the Association of Opera in Canada, and the Canadian Dance Assembly. So a quick timeline of how we've progressed thus far. By the way, I made this presentation myself in Canva. Really proud of this page. I think it looks really good. Looks like I really tried, everybody. I did, but also just Canva come through. So firstly, we started in June 2020, which was the idea for the pledge. And then August 2020, we presented a draft of it at PactCon. PACT has been such an early and deep supporter of Black Pledge. And from October 2020, a group of us met on a regular basis once a week to draft the pledge, and then worked in between to do that. And then February 2021, we released the pledge into the world. We sent it out to various theater companies. By August 2021 of that year, we had 5 organizations that were willing to sign, which is wonderful. In 2022, we were able to have an administrator work for Black Pledge part-time. We did a PACT town hall earlier that year to update everybody on what we were doing. We met with signers and we put in our first Canada Council grant request. In 2023, we were successful in our Canada Council grant, which was to do a series of anti-Black racism workshops for directors, producers, designers, etc. And we did our first workshop in October for directors, and that went really well. And then also lead producer, which is me, and communications lead, which is Tamara Jones, was hired part-time. Oh, and our administrator is Georgia Grant. And yeah, so the 3 of us have been able to work on Black Pledge part-time since the fall of last year, and it's been working really well. So to give you an update on what we're up to lately, we meet on a bi-monthly basis. So anybody who wants to meet with us in terms of who identifies as a Black artist or Black arts worker is You are welcome to join our meetings. Just reach out and we'll give you the Zoom link and get you involved. Um, we have a plan for something called the Year of Black Performance, which will begin in 2024, which is to mark the final year of the UN's decade of people of African descent. And we put in a grant for that and more to come. And we're really excited to launch that in August of this year. And we're also working on a Black artist mapping and archiving project, which we will bring together various Black led and Black serving arts organizations from across the country. This is a big, long, probably 3, 4 year project to find Black artists and have a system of archiving our work. We had a meeting with Black designers, technicians, production managers, and stage managers, and that went really well. And we're hoping to animate that group more in the new year. And we're continuing the anti-Black racism workshops that we received Canada Council funding for. We have one upcoming with TAPA and one upcoming with PACT at the end of the month, and more to come. Also, a group of us are a part of Cultural Pluralism Arts Movement Ontario, Pluralism and Organizational Change, the POMOPOC. Really had to put out that I could just call it the POMOPOC, but it's like acronym alert. We always got to spell the acronym. So we've been doing those train the trainer workshops, which has been really great because we're learning even more about the steps toward organizational change. So yeah, that and more to come, but that's kind of where we're at. So that's the Black Pledge in a nutshell. So yeah, right now, I'm gonna put it over to Rebecca Ann, or just Becca. Um, like, I'd just love to have a conversation about the challenges that you face as a Black artist working in rural areas and like the things that you're hopeful for. Just to say a little bit more about the Black Pledge and my journey with it personally, is that it's just been a really healing, actually, the process of creating and coming together with Black artists on a regular basis, because we've experienced a lot of things, and it's been nice to be able to, on a regular basis, outside of a show or any pressure filled environment, just to be able to relate and talk to each other, um, and to hear about people's experiences. So, with that spirit, I open it up to you. Tell us about what the challenges you're facing and all that jazz.
Can everyone hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, brilliant. Challenges. I mean, there's so many. This industry isn't particularly kind, just in general. Um, I would say that being seen is the biggest challenge. Just automatically based on your appearance, you instantly become othered. Not sure if you've experienced that, but like there is a lot of, still to this day, a lot of I would say whitewashing within the theater industry or the entertainment industry. We are just not conventionally seen as the, well, since I'm a she, I will say as pretty, but as attractive, I guess you would say. And then being rural, there's just also not the same opportunities as you would have being in a larger metropolitan area. There's fewer acting roles in the rural community, so you're already fighting for less opportunities. And then if you're searching for more, you would have to go to like the city, into a metropolitan area. And I think that's kind of where my struggle is right now, is that everything that I've built family wise is here. I live in Lindsay, which is 20 minutes outside of Ballcajon, which is where I work. But the Kawartha Lakes as a whole is where my family, my partner's family are, and obviously my work at Globus Theater is in this area. And so Globus has afforded me a lot of great opportunities, which I really appreciate. But growing outside of that, what does that exactly look like? I'm not really sure, to be honest. Does it look like traveling outside of this community to find work? Probably. What else would you like to know? Any questions that have spurred from that?
Yeah. Yes, several have. I think I'm interested, how did you even find your way to theater as a thing that you do, or all
That's
the arts that you do?
that's fascinating. That's a great question. So I actually did grow up in Durham, so just outside of Toronto in the GTA. And my parents had put me in choir. So that was like my first kind of performing area, was singing in this choir that toured around Canada, which is cool. From there, my dad ended up retiring and moving us to the Kawartha Lakes. And I was in high school at the time, so I didn't really do a lot of outside extracurricular stuff. I didn't go back to theater until I was in university and there happened to be a drama club. Um, and I didn't even go to school for theater. Like I went to school for social science. So I have a degree in like a very specialized political science. It's policy and community development. And then I also have a degree in forensic psychology. So I was just going to go into the government and change the world. Um, didn't do that. Did not go into politics and did not change the world that way, but that's okay. So I was in drama club. I did a few like little plays there. And then there's a local community theater where I am, and ended up doing a few productions there as well. Um, from there, I obviously made some connections that led to me getting an agent, which was really cool. As well as just kind of encouraging me to be like, hey, this is actually a viable um, career choice. Like you can go out and like perform and be in the arts and it's not poo-pooed. Um, and then also when I was in university, my first job was at Globus Theater. I worked in the Lakeview Arts Barn, which is the venue that the Globus Theater is in. So I worked in the kitchen, but then kind of over the few years, kind of worked my way into the theater area. Yeah.
Okay, wow. It's quite the journey. What university did you go to?
I went to, it's not called UOIT anymore. It was at the time when I went, University of Ontario Institute of Technology in Oshawa. So
Oh,
that's the one that's, so there's UOIT and then there's Durham College. Now it is called, I think it's just called Ontario Tech. They shortened it. Um, but I know quite a few people that are going there now. It is growing. It used to be so small. Like when I went, my faculty was in downtown Oshawa. It wasn't even on the main campus. Um, so a lot of our classes were just randomly in like historic buildings in downtown Oshawa. But now they've grown to be like huge. They have like a ton of like student residences. They're a big international campus as well, which is kind of cool.
wow.
Um, yeah, but I had at the time, no aspirations to ever become a performer.
Oh, really? So you tried it out and then you were like, oh, I really like this.
Yeah, quite literally. Yeah, I was like, oh, this is fine. This seems natural. A little bit of anxiety inducing. But turns out I just had anxiety. The
Oh,
performing was
baseline.
yeah, just performing is fine. Anxiety was like a side thing that I had to like journey through. And I'm good now. We're all good there.
Okay, good. Good. And then, yeah, you said you got an agent from there. How did that happen?
That there was a youth production at the Lindsay Little Theater, and um a lot of the youth there had an acting coach that was within the industry, so she would recommend the ones that she felt were like had the spark, had the intuition to go for it. She had sent me a link to do like an open casting self tape for a random CBC show. Um, so I did it. They liked it, which was wild. And they asked me for a callback in person. So I went and I met like the director, the casting director, and all that. Um, didn't end up getting cast. That's okay. I did get all the way to like on hold, essentially.
Ooh,
For like my first attempt. That was pretty cool. And I didn't get booked, but that acting coach did recommend me to an agent. She was just like, hey, this girl made it this far. She has something. Maybe you want to have a conversation with her. And so that's how I ended up with Faith. From at the time it was Fountainhead, but now it is Element. They changed the name, but yeah, that's how I ended up with my agent. So
Oh, cool.
yeah,
Cool. And
worked out.
you're still auditioning.
Yeah, still auditioning. Still trying. You know, it's a process. I can't really like I think there's all this you kind of hear about all the people that kind of like make it. They make it like big and they're like one film and then they're like sought after that. But there's like a lot of
Oh,
like behind the scenes stuff where you have to like continuously grind. You have to continuously be auditioning. Um and I can't say that I'm a great auditioner, to be honest. Like I get very nervous, especially when there's like a whole panel of people kind of just staring at you. So you know that's still a journey that I'm on right now. Like I know that Globus Theatre often does general auditions in Toronto with a bunch of other theaters, um, and that's kind of like my internal goal is to like actually go for one of those general auditions. Like I know most of the artistic directors that would be there. But like it's still a nerve-wracking process. So yeah.
for sure. Um, on that note, I'm really deeply curious about like just thinking through your journey of how you got to where you are now and the many people who have like given you a chance, you know what I mean, which is
Hmm.
worth talking about because it's like easy to talk about the problems, which are important, but
Hmm.
also it's like what does actually work, is also important. But I'm curious for you, like what shifts would you want to see for like Black and BIPOC artists on a whole? Like what areas would you want to see change, or what attitudes like need to change so that there are more opportunities for everybody across the board?
I think so the things that worked for me was quite literally knowing people and having connections that I didn't even think were important. Like I interact with many actors and artists that come through Globus Theater's doors. And they're the ones that have been like, hey, this opportunity has come up. Would you be interested? That's how I ended up at Sterling Festival Theater, which I had a great time. Uh, and I think having a network that is open to anyone that is colored. And I feel like that just seems so simple. Like that just seems so easy. I think most people would be like, yeah, we are open. Like I don't see why we wouldn't be. But actually having that in practice is very different.
Mm-hmm.
I would say the majority of theater that I see still, my reaction when I see someone of color in a lead role, I'm like, oh my God, look at them go. I'm
Of
like,
course.
that seems so like that seems a bit old, doesn't it? Like for us to just like obviously we should be celebrating, but just the idea of being shocked about it just kind of boggles my mind. I think we should be moving past that of just being like, look at them, they made it. We should just be experiencing it on the regular. Um, I would love to have a community of Black and BIPOC actors and artists where we could share and just be like, hey, these people have been very kind to me. They've afforded me a lot of opportunities. This opportunity is coming up. Maybe you would like to go for it. Because that would be just so helpful. Because sometimes you just don't even know what's out there. Especially if it is about something that you're passionate about. Because you can just like obviously you can like go on eDrive and like see all the audition opportunities and put yourself out there, but there's so much more that is happening outside of that. Um, but you don't necessarily know about it.
Yeah, I hear you. It really is about uh it is that networking piece, and it's like more than networking, it's like relationship building.
Yeah.
And so that it's yeah, it's more than auditioning as an actor. It just really is. I realized that myself, you know.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, uh, what? Okay, sorry, I had a question and then I went right out of my head. But I have so many questions. But no, I hear you. Like being able to come together, you know, was really important. Oh yeah, okay, I remember. All right. So there's a framework that I am like that I think about in regards to EDI, social justice work. So equity, diversity, inclusion, and social justice work. And something that the Black Pledge is trying to get to with this. Oh my God, is that your
This is
puppy?
Trevor. Sorry, he has
Okay.
suddenly appeared. This is our senior dog. We've just got him.
I
He's
love pets.
currently wearing a very beautiful gray hoodie and he wanted to show it off.
Oh,
So uh, he might
so
have
cute.
some opinions as well.
Okay,
So
sweet. I respect his opinions, right, frankly. Um, so yeah, it's interesting to think about um three different or four different areas. And when we're looking at sort of an analysis of how to move forward and how to even like evaluate how we're doing in regards to EDI. So the first part that you pointed to is representation. So that's just about like literally like having people who are not white, who aren't men, who aren't the huge people in any number of positions. So just like representation. Aside, I really feel like this piece is where like this where feminism has gotten stuck because just like I talk about feminism a lot, especially because I was working with Nightwood. It just became about women in leadership positions or women doing things. And you're just like, but it's not enough to that women are visible and doing things. And I don't think it's enough for any number of other marginalized groups that they're just there. That it helps and it's a step forward, but it isn't the end all and be all, you know?
Mhm.
Another aspect is content. So that's just like literally what are things about? Because we can have representation and not shift the content, i.e., you know, any number of Shakespeare productions, ones I've been in, where we're just like, okay, there's a Black Romeo and Juliet or something, you know what I mean? Or like,
Yeah.
you know, like that, where you're just like, great, like you can put people of color in those roles, um, you know, or what they might call colorblind casting, which I don't like as a phrase. It's A, it's ableist, but B,
Mhm.
it's not really possible. Like when you put someone in a role, it does change how people view it, you know?
Mhm.
So there's that. And then so the content is important too. So it's not just about like, okay, people of color, Black people, LGBTQ plus, et cetera, are in the roles. It's just like, what are the stories we're actually telling and how do they center those folks? You know, how do they center their narratives? How does the story shift? And then there's some of the hardest pieces, which is the process piece, which I think is something that Black Pledge really tries to go in on, is and why it even exists at all. Because a lot of us who wrote the pledge together and who continue this work, it's like we were cast in things or we were working for companies in various capacities. However, we weren't treated well, or we
Mm.
experienced racism either internally in the company or externally,
Mhm.
which might be my next question for you. I'll just write that one down. But so there's that piece. So that's the hardest piece because the process piece is asking us like how we work together, how we treat each other, what agreements do we have? Do we have agreements? What are our policies? Like what do we do when conflict arises? What do we do when difficult things happen? how do we welcome people, that kind of thing. So that's like the hardest piece to shift. And then
Mhm.
there's the other piece, which is like community connection. So something that also happens, I find in Toronto actually, is that there actually is Black led work, but then the Black communities don't actually know about them.
Mm.
So there's any number of shows that happen where it's like an all Black cast and even like a Black creative team, and it's for a mostly white audience, you know? So that piece is also important as well. So yeah, knowing that, just like putting forth that framework of like representation,
Mhm.
content, process, community connection, like where do you feel like in terms of where you're situated, Lindsay, Bob Cage, and Kawartha Lakes, et cetera, like where do you think out of those four, like what is needed now?
Yes. All of the above. Oh man, it really depends. Like, I think that people in this area get very stuck on the superficial, like just knowing that someone has done something is okay. Like they give themselves a pat on the back. They're
Hmm.
like, "Ooh, we've created a diversity chair or a committee,
Hmm.
or we're gonna have this talk to celebrate diversity or to pinpoint Black History Month or something." Like, it's very performative, and it's not necessarily like getting to the deep roots of the fact that this area has always been oh, I would say a little behind um in inclusivity. Oh my goodness, stuttering. Um so it like all of the above, and the fact that, like, yeah, it does need to start opening roles up for literally anyone that is not Caucasian, not a man. Um, but it also does need to start thinking about the process. What does that mean? It can't just mean like one person in a role. It's great. Like, I was that person in a role. I was a Black Cinderella, and I received like notes and emails from parents being like, my daughters loved seeing someone that was like their color on stage. And that, like, I feel great. I love that. Um, but it can't just be that. It can't just be one and done type situation. Um, and then there 100% needs to be more communication in terms of what is happening. Um, this community is very fractured in terms of sharing news. I mean, and I think it might have to do with the fact that it is kind of two generations. Like, we have a very large seniors population, and then we also have younger families moving up from the city. And so I apologize if you can hear my dog snoring. His opinions are now just sleeping. Um, and so um, what that means is that there's a fractured type of ideal for the lifestyle here. there's um there's a lot of ideas that slowly are moving out, um but there are also a lot that are a lot of um I will say conservative, not in terms of politics, but in terms of like traditional value systems that are still holding strong here, that will still prevent, I think, a lot of inclusive growth in this area.
Mm.
Yeah.
That have you seen anything, any even small thing to work that shifts people's ideas even just a little bit?
Yes and no. And the fact that like we'll circle back to like the performative nature of things. Like
Hmm.
it does. Oh my goodness, are you okay? Sir. Just startled himself. Having small examples of like, say, creating the diversity community is great. Because then it gets people thinking. They're like, oh yeah, we should have these things. Um but then there does happen to be a little bit of a backlash, and then people start to kind of like backpedal.
Hmm.
And I don't know. It might just be this area. I don't know. I don't necessarily think that all rural communities are like this.
Mhm.
I think there's lots that are open to change and open to um, having everyone involved everywhere. I remember auditioning for a role, and the director was literally like, "You were the best candidate." However, it's a quote unquote period piece, and so they wouldn't have a black female detective in this era. And I was like, "All right, cool, cool."
It's not true.
That I was like,
It's factually
that's
not
your
true.
that's your opinion.
It's an opinion. It's factually not true. It's interesting when anything becomes period and people just act like people of color just weren't there. And
They
then if you
weren't.
actually,
Didn't you know?
I know, but you're just like, but then you actually go and you can look at various historical accounts and they were there. Um, they were there, you know? So it's just like, and anyway, even if they weren't, which is not true, it's just like it's a piece of fiction, like
That's
for
the
the
cool
most
thing
part.
about theaters, that we
Yeah.
can imagine, like we can go and play in worlds that are not like the one we are in.
Yeah, that's the point of it all.
Yeah.
But it can be, yes, those kinds of attitudes are really difficult. And it just speaks to the lack of knowledge that there is around what happened in the past, um, and people not doing their research,
Mm-hmm.
really, because even in Ontario, something that always strikes me about Canada on a whole, but certainly speaking of like Southern Ontario, in a big way, it's just like we learn about, at the very least, we learn about the Underground Railroad. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? And so, where did the Black people go once they got to Canada? Did they just disappear? Like,
Yeah.
think like so
They
then they were
stayed
here.
underground.
Yeah, they just kind of stayed in the literal Underground Railroad. So it just was like just as a thought experiment. You know what I mean? You're just like, so we know that a lot of enslaved people left through this this network, this clandestine network, and it's just like, and they came to Canada, so they stayed. So there were settlements. There were settlements of Black people, and there were families and such, and even thinking through any number of other melanated, racialized communities, they were also documented here. You know what I mean? They were here, so it's disappointing to hear that kind of thing, but not uncommon, and it just speaks to how much we need to continue to share knowledge and to uplift stories that have been buried. Um, okay, next question. Tell me about the backlash, like the like the external racism and oppression. So, like, i.e., I think it can show up, and it does show up. Unfortunately, it's kind of some of the hardest stuff about sometimes working um, outside of Toronto, even. It's like, is that people write letters or whatever, or they're upset about changes. If there is, like, I don't know, a Black Cinderella, for example, why, like, how has it been dealt with in from what you've seen? It doesn't even have to be dealt with well, but just like, has it been dealt with, or like what's been the reaction, or what's been the response?
I would say in the circles that I am in, the response is usually like shocking, that like,
Oh, they're
oh,
shocked.
there's still like more the work hasn't been done. Like there are people that still feel this way.
Mhm.
But I would say in the greater scheme, like I do feel like a lot of people in this area do have the same kind of internalized racism. Like, and I also sometimes have to check myself and the fact that like I've been here for many years. And there's things where I go, is that correct in me thinking? And then I'm like, no, I don't think so. Where did that thought come from? Is it something that you've seen in this area? Is it something that you've always had? Um, like I'm adopted, so I have two beautiful, lovely Caucasian parents. And one of the great things that I do have to say about how I was raised is that they never raised me thinking that I had a color of any form. Like we were just a family. There's just the three of us. So we were just like a family. And so I never really would think about them being different than me. Quite physically they are. And so when I would introduce them, people would be like, "Oh, these are your parents." Like, yeah, man. They're like, "Oh, not your grandparents." No, they are my parents. They are a bit older. They are also white. Yes, these are my parents. uh, and oh, bless you. Um, I don't know. I don't. I think racism is more. I don't know. I was gonna say it could be more subtle, but sometimes it's not. Like literally, there was a review that was like, "Globus Theater is too woke." I'm like, oh no. Like what do you do with that? Like we're we're literally not too woke. I would say we're just correct. Like we're just right.
Reflecting
Like
the world. Yeah.
yeah, that we exist in. Like I don't think there's anything right or wrong with the production that we have put on. Like, and then it comes into question of like how should you respond? What is the correct way to deal with something like that? Like, is it writing a reply, being like, or is it like just accepting like that? Someone's opinion, maybe that's not my area to try to change it. Or maybe it gets you thinking about like how can I get more education out into this community? But then that sends me on a spiral of like, is it my job to educate people? Or is it their job to start trying to absorb something different? A different yeah, like it just
I
it's
think we end up having to do it.
yes, we do. We do. I know that when you were saying that the Black Pledge started in 2020, my kind of response during that whole phenomenon, it felt so kind of out of body experience, kind of out of worldly, like what was happening. My response was to post on my social media just some phrases and kind of trying to explain like why they weren't okay or where they even came from. Just and I took that upon myself to share it and then promote some conversations about it. But it's it's crazy to think that like you could have a march here in our small town um that is both supported by the community and also very strongly hated at the same time.
More than one thing is true at once.
Yeah.
Um, just to give you my take on it too, where I've landed personally with my politics on things. And why SPARC is exciting for that is that I'm like, okay, thinking of things like a spectrum, you know, that there's going to be people on the extreme end. Um, and then there's most people I would say are in the middle politics wise. And then there's people who are on the other end, which is I'm on the other end. I admit, like I'm like
Mhm.
radical leftist for sure. I proudly say that. Um, not to say there aren't problems with being radically left, because there's a lot of things to say about that. However, knowing that most people are in the middle, then I'm just like, okay, I feel like energy is better spent shifting those folks and empowering those folks than it is with the people who are kind of too far gone. You know what I
Mhm.
mean?
Mhm.
As a Black person. However, I feel like as a white person, the more they can shift some of those people, knowing that they're never going to be a radical left, but they could at least shift a little bit
Mhm.
or a little bit more in their views, then that's the work. 'Cause it's like the difficult uncles and aunts and cousins and friends from high school, like those folks who you're like, oh God, you were at the Freedom Convoy, like, whoo, but
Mhm.
having the courage to have conversations with those people is an ongoing conversations, an ongoing work is actually, I think, what will help.
Mhm.
But as a Black person, yeah, I don't feel like I want to take on the labor of people who are kind of on the extreme ends of things. But yeah, just to share a little bit something before we get right into, there's a question. Woo-hoo, oh my God, there's a question. There's a question. Um, it's, and I want to share this because I think it's really important to share that, Black people truly are not a monolith. And like some people don't believe in the Black pledge, like, i.e., they're like, why are you spending time trying to change white people when you could spend time and energy developing yourself as an artist or developing your own
Mhm.
organization, developing your artistic work. It's an argument that has come forth with Black Pledge, which I think is fair. You know, um, where I land with it and why I continue to do this work is because there are a number of Black organizations. However, that isn't going to be for a lot of Black people working in live performance. Those aren't necessarily going to be their first points of entry. Like to just bring things full circle to the ways that you got involved with theater, it wasn't necessarily Black led or Black centered work,
Mhm.
and it wasn't mine either. You know what I mean? And so the ecology on the whole needs to shift because the way that people come to the work it's going to be often through white led organizations.
Mhm.
So then they need to shift because they tend to be able to reach more people. Maybe there will be a time in the future when we won't need the Black Pledge anymore, or we won't need to do this work of like addressing anti-Black racism. But yeah, I guess I'm just really interested in the future generations, even my own future work. Like I'm just like, oh yeah, I do want to be able to work anywhere.
Mhm.
Like I do want to be able and have a place ready for me and ready for the things that I bring.
Mhm.
So, okay. But anyway, all right. Okay. Oh, question. Okay. How can we, as a mostly white group, build trust with Black members of our community and let them know about our community theater group and arts council and future opportunities with us? Oh, I love that. What a great question. I'll start and say that it's like, how can we build trust? Just get rid of the first part of this test question. Build trust with Black community. I was like, the question, the answers of the question is to build the trust. But to be more specific, I'll put a couple thoughts in, and yeah, please throw in, of course, Rebecca Ann. I would say that it's really important to reach out to people,
Mhm.
and something that um, one little pro tip would be: is there a network of Black people? Like, is it, and a network is like, is there a WhatsApp group? Is there a Google group? Is there a regular in-person meetup? Is there a church where Black people are? Then send stuff to those people, find
Mhm.
it. I would also say if you can identify sort of any like cultural animators, we might call them, that's what Canada Council calls them, but like folks who are cultural connectors in the community. So folks who are like, oh yeah, this is the person who sends out stuff. This is, if you can recognize people like that, then send it to them and have them
Mhm.
send it out, on a regular basis. And that's how you build trust, and that's how you build community, and that's how people know about things. Because oftentimes Black people may not be as plugged into mainstream places. Like people, as an example, may not be on the Canadian Actors Equity list, not to say a community theater, or if there's a community theater list, they may
Mhm.
not be on it. You know what I mean? They're not necessarily plugged in. As we talked about previously, this networking and relationship building is really key to generating opportunities. So yeah, plug in and find the people who are connected to the wider community and send stuff to them. But what are your thoughts?
I totally agree. It kind of follows the stream of like who's doing the educating. Like, are we educating or are people seeking to be educated? And so in that sense, like, I mean, we're here. Like the Black people are here. Um, we just don't necessarily know where the opportunities are or whether certain groups are inclusive. So I think if you are, like, you should be like shouting it. Like yeah, there's regular places like the Facebook, Instagram, et cetera, that you can be sharing that. But also, yeah, like searching and seeing if there are other community groups that are specific for people of color, that's where you should be trying to reach out.
Yeah, big time. I'll also recommend um there's a culturebrew.art, which is a database out of Vancouver, but it's national. And so they've been doing the work for years now to connect, BIPOC artists, racialized and Indigenous artists, as they say, from across the country. And they put out bulletins. They have the whole database of of artists as well. So like, yeah, finding things like that. Um, I would also. Oh, I had another thought, but it went out my head. But it'll come back. Hold on. Um, yeah, Instagram, Facebook, all the things, and um, yeah. Oh, yeah. Now I remember. I've noticed that opportunities connected with money seem to do very well.
Mm,
So if there's, and the community theater is not always connected with money. So, hey, you know what I mean? But if Arts Council that you're talking about has opportunities for uh, where you're giving people, artists, money to do things, I find that that seems to bring a lot more people out. And
mhm.
um, so with that though, if you're providing an opportunity that is financially compensated, whatever that might be, I would say then something that's really important that not enough people do, not enough organizations do, is just like whoever applies for that, like keep their information and like have a database. That way you're not starting again for the next time. You're like, oh
Absolutely.
great, look at all these people applied, but they didn't necessarily get it. But we have their information now. We know, we can reach out to them when there's future opportunities. Um, so yeah, it's this work of outreach and relationship building that you just need to do, and depending on your capacity, right? Like
Yeah.
you can't do everything, but can you do a few things well, like one or two things that would be effective, and just keep doing them and see how they work. One more thing I will say about community theater that might be great is just like think about having a Black director or a Black designer as an example, and in that role, and see what that would bring in terms of
Mhm.
reaching out to um, Black members of the community. I mean, it is a shortcut to change, is like having Black people in leadership roles. It does change things. It doesn't change everything, but it can definitely shift some things. Um, yeah. I guess there's no other questions. And we got 5 minutes left. I got more to say, but on that topic of um, relationship building and being in a leadership role, I think it's so interesting. Your practice is so interesting. You're like photographer, performer, and also like, general manager. What, like, how do you, can you think of one example of a way that like the lens that you bring to Globus has like shifted things a little bit?
I just not to like boost myself up. Like I think just having
But yes,
me
boost yourself
there.
up. Yes, boost
I
yourself
feel
up.
like just like me being there in a leadership role impacting certain artistic decisions is just helpful. Like um like it just means that there's just an extra set of eyes, an extra person with a differing opinion. Like it's even just having that opportunity to be there is pretty cool. I know when Rachel did my introduction, she talked about how I did the inaugural Youth Winter Arts Project, which was last year. And that one isn't Globus has always had a strong youth program, like since its creation. And so that is one of the ways that I think I'm impacting the most is just building up the future generations that are not mine, that are just below me, and just encouraging them to have voices. I remember when I was growing up, I was always I was like performing for like my parents. Like I was like being my little crazy self, but for my inner circle. And so just being there to like show these youth and young adults that like, yeah, your opinion matters. What you have to say is important. For me, that's like where my work is the most special. We had 12 youth last year that the whole premise of these Winters Art Project is that they create what they want to create. It's
Mhm.
not me telling them like this is what we're gonna do. Um, it's it's them telling their story, but also if it happens to follow along a written plot, then that's great. So last year we had 12 youth. They did a version of the Scottish play that was comedic, and they really worked hard and they sold out their showcase. And for me, just knowing that they had the best time and they were telling their friends and family, and those friends and family were like, how do we get involved next year? That's that's great for me. That means that people are starting to value the arts, and they're starting to value the younger generation as well. Because I feel like a lot of people poo-poo the younger generation. They're still developing. They're like, they don't know everything. They don't know the world, but like they do. Like they are literally out there living it. They have lots of experiences that they should have the opportunity to share.
I think it's funny you say like people like poo-poo the younger generation. You're just like, oh God, what is that? Oh, we're all destined to do it. It's like kids these days. You're just like, do you
Yeah.
realize that that's such an old thing to say? That literally every generation is just going to say kids these days are not doing things um the way that we did them, and therefore
Yeah.
what's wrong with them? And it's just like, well, kids these days are a product of they're products of their environment. So,
Yeah.
they're pointing if there's things that we have to say that we take issue with, it's like, okay, well, how did they get that way? They didn't, they weren't born that way,
Yeah, exactly.
So, but anyway, but yeah, I think it's so powerful that you are there, representation does matter. As much as I said it isn't the end all be all, but it's still important. Like for them to have you as a leader in that space, it just like opens up again that's possible, as they go on in their journeys, it becomes less of an anomaly to see a Black person in a leadership role. It becomes like something that's more and more possible for them. Oh my God, do you have a cat as well?
So now we're being joined by Plum.
Oh my
Very
God, I
briefly.
love. Oh my gosh, your cat's so
It's a
adorable.
zoo down here.
Oh my gosh, they're so adorable. But okay, well, we're at 8:01, so we'll stop there. We could keep going. Oh my God.
We
Thank you,
totally could.
Rebecca Ann, and thank
Oh,
you so
thank you.
much, Rachel.
Yes, thank you, Rachel.
Thank you both. This has been a really great conversation to be witness to and to experience. And I'm really looking forward to sharing it with everyone through our YouTube channel. And thanks to everyone who's been watching live or might be watching after the fact. Really quickly, please join us next month on Wednesday, February 28th at 7 p.m. when Isabel Michaud joins us for how visual arts crosses over into performing arts in Northern communities. And also hot off the presses, because we have not announced anything about Symposium 2024 yet, any of our workshop leaders or workshop topics. But because of tonight's conversation and how great it's been, I really want to let everyone know that Sedina and the Black Pledge will be presenting a workshop, Beyond Black Squares, celebrating and uplifting Black artists at the 2024 Symposium in Minto. So please come on out, learn more, share some more time with our amazing facilitator this evening, Rebecca Ann. Thank you so much. Loved hearing about your stories and Bob Cajun. Can't wait to meet the show. And again, thank you both. And we're gonna stop our live now.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.
And
Thanks.
stop recording.